Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar today for getting started in FCS Express for previous FlowJo users. My name is Sean Burke. I'm a Director of Research Marketing and Business Development at the Novo Software, and I'm really happy to be guiding folks through this webinar today, where we're going to give you a little bit of background about some of the differences between FCS Express and some other software packages that you might be using or have used in the past to help you kind of transition over to working more efficiently in FCS Express. And as a quick way to kind of start here today, I thought I'd pull up a little bit of an agenda of some of the topics that we're going to be covering today in the webinar. And in today's webinar, we're going to give you kind of a high-level introduction just for a few minutes right in the beginning to FCS Express and Novo Software. I know we have a lot of folks joining us on the call today that have never used FCS Express before. They've kind of heard great things about it. They've been using whatever other software might be available to them, at their facility. So we'll give you a little bit of background there. We're going to come in and kind of start where you generally start with any software, how to load data. We're going to take a look at the data list in FCS Express, take a look at the layout in FCS Express, and compare those concepts to the workspace and the layout editor in FlowJo. We're going to talk about creating plots, creating layouts, and also some of the translations, right? So we know when you work in other pieces of software, you might be used to doing certain things. In FCS Express, I'm sure we have, all the functionality that you'd be looking for from another software, but there might be some translations about what we call those things and where they are. So we'll give you a little bit of a guiding basis on that. Some of these things we'll talk about backgating, adjusting scalings, and changing plots. And of course, getting into gating, spreadsheets versus the table editor, batching and exporting to final results in FCS Express versus kind of batching to the layout editor and other software. And we're going to kind of round things out at the end, talking about some of the specialized visualization tools in FCS Express, some of the integrated transformations and pipelines versus having to use plugins and other kind of functionality in other software packages that are out there. So as I mentioned, I'd like to start with just a little bit of background in FCS Express for those folks who are new to it, and just about 4 or 5 minutes here. The place I'd like to start is why use FCS Express. We know that you might be coming from other data analysis softwares, so I kind of like to compare this to technology convergence, things that we've done in the past, right? Most of us, if we've been around long enough, you may have actually used this little cell phone, but at one point you had a cell phone and you had to carry around a camera and you had to carry around a GPS and even a calculator, whatever this thing is up here, and a computer. And life is very easy now because everything is wrapped into a smartphone. We don't have to carry around all these kind of external devices and packages. And the same kind of need for convergence can be seen with flow cytometry data analysis. Generally you're using some data analysis software, and then you have to copy and paste out into Excel and transpose data and bring that to Prism, and copy and paste low resolution graphics out to PowerPoint. If you're doing image cytometry work, you have to use other things. And what we try to accomplish in FCS Express is that everything that you're doing in all of these other software packages is available within FCS Express. So if you move a gate, bar plots that you created downstream in Excel update directly in FCS Express as you move that gate, not as you copy and paste and bring it somewhere else and do something else. So what we're really focused on is getting results within FCS Express rather than having to work between an analysis software and a presentation software and a graphing software, so you can get your results quickly and easily. That being said, folks all around the world are using FCS Express, right? If you've come to this webinar and you've never heard of it before, or if you heard of it and you don't think anybody is using it, right? We've been around since 1998. Thousands of research labs are using FCS Express. They're publishing with it all the time. And since 2019, we've been on version 7 of FCS Express. We are constantly updating version 7 now that we've moved to a subscription model for our software, which allows us essentially to push out new features and the things that you need as modern cytometrists more quickly and easily. Now, We are based out of downtown Pasadena, California. So you can see this is our kind of corporate headquarters, so to say. But we have little triangles on this map kind of all over the world, representing where we have staff and distributors and folks who are dedicated to supporting FCS Express. And I think the really important thing here to notice is that we have folks on all time zones. We have folks in Europe. We have folks on East Coast, West Coast, because we know that your data analysis doesn't always get done between 9 and 5, and that you don't just have questions between 9 and 5. So if you write us at support at Novo Software at any time, even if it's 1 in the morning, you might be surprised how quickly you get a reply, and that's going to be very different than some other software, companies and tools that are out there. So as we go through this webinar, as you have questions that come up, just don't forget, reach out to us at support@denovosoftware.com. Even if it's in the middle of the night, we'll be getting back to you, usually within an hour or two, but never more than 24 hours. So we're going to hop into the software here in just a moment, but before we do, I just wanted to lay out a few kind of logistical items in the software. One is we run both on Mac and PC, and we're fully interchangeable. So if you're a Macophile, you can do all your analysis there. You can send it to your PI down the hall who's using a PC. You can save things at home, bring them in to work, and kind of move interchangeably between the software and operating system platforms. Of course, we're going to read data from every flow cytometer on the market. We've been doing this since 1998. But one of the things that we offer that's kind of different than some of the other tools that we're comparing to today is that we can read the full spectrum data from Cytec instruments, from Sony instruments. We can read data, including image data from image cytometers. And also, very importantly, we have no limit to the number of events or parameters in data files. We're not going to be talking about compensation in any sort of detail today, but we've seen it all. We've been in business for over 25 years. So rest assured, we can read compensation from your instruments. We can do auto compensation. We can even do auto unmixing in the software, which is really great for your spectral data sets. And also, very importantly, all of the regular, descriptive statistics, the commonly used plot types, those types of things that you see published are out there are in FCS Express. And one of the first kind of juxtapositions I like to make to, using folks who are using FlowJo software is that if you don't see a plot type that FlowJo has, don't assume that FCS Express doesn't have that, right? So there's going to be some of these translations, right? If you're used to working with a pseudo color plot in FlowJo, we call that a density plot in FCS Express. If you're used to working with a zebra plot in FlowJo, we call that a contour plot with black and white stripes in FCS Express, right? So we have all of these visualizations, and sometimes it's just a matter of figuring out where they are. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the best ways that you can do that is you can reach out to our support team, right? Of course, you're welcome to go to our website and search around and figure out what we call that plot. But if you reach out to us at support and even send us a picture and say, hey, I've been trying to do this in FCS Express, I've been doing it in FlowJo for years, where is it? One of our support staff is going to get back to you and give you that answer very quickly and easily. Now, we're going to jump into FCS Express in just one moment, but what I want you to kind of remember as we move through the software today is that in FCS Express, the analysis is integrated with your final result, right? And a final result could be a lab presentation, it could be a poster at a conference. Remember, we're going to be going back to conferences pretty soon, which is awesome. It could be a comparison, t-tests, ANOVAs, regression plots. All of these things are final results that generally you need to use multiple software packages when you're using other tools like FlowJo to accomplish. And we get all of this done in FCS Express by having integrated spreadsheets, integrated graphing tools, integrated reporting and presentation tools. As you make changes to gates and data files, everything updates in real time. So what we want to see you doing is not having to use external software, not just for plot enhancements, but really for anything. The graphics that we get out of FCS Express are ultra high resolution. You can change your defaults. If you want a graphic at 700 DPI because you need to take out a billboard on the highway, you can do that. Or better yet, if the publisher comes back and says, I need things at 350 DPI, you can set that in FCS Express. And things like that are going to reduce time and complexity when performing your analysis and getting results. So there's a lot of specialized analysis we're not going to cover today, right? Today we're going to give you some of the basics of translating from FlowJo to FCS Express. But rest assured, we've got heat maps, proliferation analysis, cell cycle. We can work with image data. We can work with FlowSum, UMAP, TISNey. Phenograph is coming out pretty soon if you're into that high dimensional stuff. And we can do all that in here. I know in some of the registration questions, people were asking if we could do flow cleaning of the data sets algorithmically, and yes, we can do all of that. So these things are all in the software for your taking. But that being said, let's jump into FCS Express and start taking a look at some of the features and functionality in here to get you started and get you translated from moving from FlowJo to FCS Express. So when we open up FCS Express, you're going to get a startup screen. And generally, you're going to click on New Layout. And you're going to get this. This is what's called a layout in FCS Express. It's kind of like a blank piece of paper. And you put objects and text boxes and data and really whatever you need to complete your report in FCS Express in this layout. Now, if you kind of juxtaposition this to FlowJo, you're kind of using the layout editor in the end to get things laid out from plots that you've already opened up and you may have in windows all over the place. To get them organized for final reporting. So one of the big differences in FCS Express is it's kind of what you see is what you get. You're not doing things in plots and windows and then moving them to a layout editor. You're building your final analysis, your final report directly in this layout. And in FCS Express, we look and feel just like Microsoft Office products, right? So you might ask why, right? This is shamelessly by design. You know that if you walk into PowerPoint and you need to insert a text box, you would go to the Insert tab, you would draw a text box on the page, you'd put text in the box, and you'd move that and resize it just like an object in PowerPoint. You could insert shapes and arrows and pictures, but also when we go to inserting data, right, we would choose some sort of plot type, like a density plot. We draw an object on the page, and let me go over to my desktop here and see if I can get my data set up. I choose a data file. It inserts an object. This is not an image, right? This is actually a data file where I can change some of my parameters of interest, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But again, it works like PowerPoint, right? I can grab multiple objects, I can delete them, I can undo, I can redo. One of the things about FCS Express that's also kind of a juxtaposition to working with FlowJo is that undo works with every single action in FCS Express, right? So if you ever get lost, you need to go back a few steps. We go back 30 steps by default. You can up that to 100 if you find you make a lot of mistakes. Generally, if you're up in your undos to 100, you may want to restart your analysis. But just keep those things in mind that we work like PowerPoint, we work like Office. So you don't have to go and sit down and read the FCS Express manual like you might have to do with other software because you're already an expert at 90% of the things in the software. So where is our data, right? Because in FlowJo, I would generally start by dragging and dropping data files into the workspace. I get a list of my data files, and here I just kind of inserted an object. So when you work in FCS Express, one of the first things that you want to pull up is what we call the data list. This is here in our data tab. And kind of magically, it seems like, oh boy, there's 8 data files in there. You only inserted 1 data file. What's going on, right? So when we work in FCS Express, if we have data that's grouped together in a folder, because generally when we acquire experiments on our cytometer, we put them in the same folder, we will bring in all of the data files in that folder into our data list by default, even when you choose just one, right? But if you're used to working with FlowJo and you wanted to grab a bunch of data files from your hard drive and you wanted to drag them into the data list, you could do that too, right? So that's another way that I can populate data files into my data list to work with an FCS Express and get them there. Now you kind of saw if I deleted some of these, it doesn't delete the files from the hard drive, right? That's just a placeholder for working with that data in FCS Express. But when we work with this data in FCS Express, what we do with the data list is we can navigate between the different data files, right? So if I click on these little numbers here, it jumps us between the different data files. If I click on next and previous up here, it jumps us between the different data files. Now, I know this is a little different. If you're working in FlowJo, you're used to kind of double clicking on a data file, it opens up a plot, you create a gate, it opens up another plot, you create a gate, it opens up another window, and then you have to take all of that and you bring it over to the layout editor at the end to put it all together into a report, right? So in FCS Express, we are kind of working in this layout to generate that report on the fly. It doesn't mean that we can't work with multiple data files at the same time. If I wanted to bring in another data file here and insert a density plot for that, I could. If I wanted to bring in another one and insert a density plot for that, I could, right? But there's kind of more efficient ways of working with this data in FCS Express than opening up a whole bunch of different plots and windows all over the place that you might be used to doing in other software. So keep in mind, this kind of difference with the data list as opposed to the workspace. In FCS Express, the data list is where you load your data, so you can easily navigate between different data files, and not as a place as a kind of repository to just open up tons of windows all over the place that you're going to put in somewhere else, right? So navigating these things is pretty easy. But you may have noticed, here, let me change to side scatter versus forward scatter. And I'm going to come into working with the parameters a little bit more in just a bit. But just so we can kind of visualize this data as we kind of look, as we kind of normally would with any flow software, I wanted to show some of the translations here, right? So one thing I can do with this plot is I can duplicate it. I can copy and paste it, and it will create a new plot, the same size, same object size, and put it in next door to it. And if I copy and paste it, do another one, pop it in here. And the reason I want to show you this is how we access different plot types in FCS Express. I could have come up here and I could have inserted a contour plot for this data if I wanted to, right? Same kind of premise. But the other thing we can do here is in our format tab, you always have the option to come in and format and change to another plot type. So if I wanted to change to a contour plot, if I wanted to come in and change to a color dot plot, right? I can make those changes directly in this analysis template. And this is what I get out at the end, right? If I exported right now, this is what I would get. It's not 3 open windows I need to kind of go and put someplace else. I want to show you also with any of the plots in FCS Express, it works like PowerPoint in the way that you present them, right? So if I right click on a plot and I choose format, a little formatting window is going to pop up. And this is where I can make some changes, right? So if I wanted to come in and say, hey, I loved working with zebra plots in FlowJo, FCS Express doesn't have zebra plots, right? Well, we come in to the color levels of our contour plot and we say, hey, change from flame to grayscale 50 level, right? And now we have a pretty good representation of what you might call a zebra plot in FlowJo, right? And you can see that I have a lot of different options here to change my visualizations. There's a lot of different kind of, color schemes that I can use for this. If I go over to my density plot, right, I can do the same sort of thing there. So if I wanted to use a grayscale because I wanted to avoid color page charges down the line, you can do that. So just keep these kind of translations in mind when you're working with FCS Express, that a lot of these changes can be done through the formatting tab. Now, another change that I kind of wanted to show you here, because I know a lot of folks come into FCS Express, they like doing backgating, right? And in FlowJo, there's kind of a separate module that pops up for backgating to backgate all your populations. But if you remember, I changed this plot type over here to a color dot plot, and I'm going to go through gating in just a little bit in a little bit more detail. But I did want to show you that the color dot plots is simply a way to represent all of our gated and backgated populations on that plot as a separate color, right? So as I move this gate, you can see the coloring on this color dot plot over here. Let me make this a little bit bigger so it's a little bit more obvious for everybody what's going on. But those colors are updating in real time. And if we were to change to another parameter like CD4, right, you can see that we're backgating those populations by using this color dot plot. Now, with the color dot plots, just like everything else in FCS Express, when you're in this formatting tab, if you wanted to display, only certain gates, you can pick and choose, right, what you want to display. So the long and short here with this kind of translation from FlowJo to FCS Express is try and make good use of the formatting windows, right? Think about what you would do to change something in Microsoft Office, to change something in Microsoft PowerPoint. You would probably right click on the object, you would choose formatting, and then you're going to be able to come in here and change that. Now, it's important because, again, in FCS Express, we're not creating a whole bunch of kind of intermediary plots before we jump ahead and do our final analysis in a separate sort of window. What you put together here is what is going to be your final result later, and that becomes a very powerful and very efficient way to work with the data sets. Yeah, and I got a really great question here. I thought I'd just kind of read it out because I'm keeping an eye on the questions. It says, can you show us how to make a complicated gating scheme and then verify all the gates in the data files are gated correctly? Thanks for that question coming through there, Pascal, because that's exactly where we're going to go next. We're going to talk about gating, right? And how to manage gate hierarchies, how to manage the gating trees, and how to quickly move between a lot of different data files and efficiently extract those results somewhere else, all right? So let me kind of jump into gating here a little bit. I'm going to get rid of some of these kind of extraneous plots that I don't need. I'm actually going to remove these gates that I created. I'm going to select it and press delete. I'm going to pop open that data list again there. So I just have it over here for quick reference. And we're going to start doing some gating. All right. So when we create gates in FCS Express, you're going to go up to the gating tab and choose some sort of gate, right? If I want to choose a rectangle, I would create a gate on the plot. I'm going to call this scatter. That gate gets created. I can move it. I can resize it. I've got a little statistic here telling me about what's gated in there, the percentages. And this is how we, create the first gate. Now, where these gates are managed, you'll probably notice when you're working with FlowJo, the gate would appear underneath the file name in the workspace, right? There's no gate appearing there. There's no statistic appearing there, right? It's a little different. Don't get nervous. All that information is there, right? It's just we're working in a different piece of software. So what we do in FCS Express, when you're ready to look at the gating hierarchy, you can insert from the Insert tab what we call a gate view, right? And this stamps a little object on the page, right? Or you can move it off the page, you can move it on the page, you can have it wherever it is that you want. But this is a printable object. So when you go and you create this report later, the gating hierarchy is going to be shown. Right now, you don't always want to show the gating hierarchy. Sometimes you just want to see it, right? You don't always want to print it, you just want to see it. So that's why we have something separate up here in the View tab called the Gate Navigator that will just show you the hierarchy without stamping anything on the page. Now, I bring both of these up because I'm going to show you how to drill down into this gate and start creating your gating hierarchy. Well, in FlowJo, what you would do is you would double click on the gate, a new window would open up, and then you'd kind of work through all these windows to create your gates and your gating hierarchy, and then eventually bring them over to the layout editor to show everything in context. What we do in FCS Express is we can drag this gate out, we can drop it anywhere else on this layout, and it will open up a new plot. That plot has the gate applied, and as I move that gate around, you can see that the gate is applied, right? Now, if I come in here and I change to say, hey, let's look at CD3, I can come in and create another gate on this plot for CD3 positives. And keep an eye on the gate view and the gate navigator, right? The hierarchy was created. It's created in both places. And that's essentially where we're going to manage our gating hierarchy tree. Now, we're going to drill down a little bit more. Right, we'll take this CD3 gate out and we'll drop it, and we'll come in here. One of the nice functionalities in FCS Express, besides just clicking on the axis label there, you could start typing in. So if I type in CD4, it's going to search and bring me to any of the parameters that have that information in there. So when you're working with kind of bigger data sets that have a lot of parameters, area, height, and width, and your SciTech data sets that have 40 parameters, you'll be able to quickly navigate through that. And you're going to see, again, as I kind of move this around, things update in real time, and we'll create some kind of very basic gates up here for CD4 and CD8. So let me change this to maybe an orange color for CD4, and we'll change this to maybe let's see here, a dark yellow for CD8. All right, and our gating hierarchy is built up. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that the gate navigator and the gate view, they work in the same way. If I need to change my gating hierarchy, right? I can drag and drop, right? There's a ton of drag and drop in FCS Express. Just dragging things and drop them around if it makes intuitive sense. If I make a change in the gate navigator, it makes the change over there in the gate view. So these tools can be used in conjunction, right? So if you don't need to print something out, remove that from the page and just use the gate navigator. If you need to add it back, it's always there. Insert the object for the gate view. You can expand that out and see what's going on in that gating hierarchy. Now, kind of getting back to that question from Pascal, um, how do we navigate and verify that gates are the same or applicable for our data files, right? So what we do in FCS Express is we make use of this data list, right? You can click on the data files and we can visualize across all the different data files these gates and how they apply to the data. Or if we're up there in that data list again, we can navigate previous and next and see what's going on, right? Now, this is always where we get the question, especially from folks coming from FlowJo. Well, how do I change the gate for this one sample, right? But not have that gate change for everything else. So in FCS Express, when we create gates, gates are global by default, right? If I move this gate and I change to a data file, every data file is moving that gate. And we know this is different than FlowJo. We know in FlowJo, you create gates on a data file. When that gate gets created in the workspace, you drag that gate up to the top of the workspace, you apply it to everything, and then that's a global gating position. So what we do in FCS Express is if you want to change on a data specific kind of level, we said maybe for sample 2 here, we want to change this gate. Well, in the gating tab, we can choose data specific gate. And now this gate will be specific for that data file, right? You can see as I move between the different data files, that gate is specific. But of course, we don't want you jumping up there all the time to choose data specific gate. If you hold down the shift key as you're navigating through data files, I'm going to do some kind of extreme gating positions here. That data specific gate will be created. So I'm holding down the shift key, I'm navigating, holding down the shift key and navigating, right? Now when I go back, we have specific data specific gates for all of these samples, right? So it's in that way, you create the plots that you want, move through the data, hold down the shift key if you got to shift that gate a little bit, hold down the shift key if you got to move that gate a little bit, and you can work through your data files there. Now, in that gate navigator, you'll also be able to visualize all of those data specific gates. So it's saying that these 4 different data files have data specific gates. Now, if I wanted to kind of create a group of gates like we do in FlowJo, what I could do is if I wanted to say, hey, take these 4 data files and use this gating position, right? Well, I can drag them on top of here. It creates a group. Now that data file uses one data specific gate, these ones all use the others, and now these ones break out and use that one. If I wanted to remove the data specific gates, come in here, press delete, everything's back to using the global gating position, right? So it's in that way that we can create a more complex gating hierarchy, we can navigate through all the data files very quickly and easily, and we can change the gates. Now, I saw another question come through about nudging gates, right? Kind of moving them in small increments. Well, if you hold down the shift key and you press the up or down arrow, or if you select the gate, hold the shift key, press left or right, up or down, it's going to nudge those gates just a little bit, right? So there's some shortcut keys in there for doing that. There's also one for expanding and contracting the gate, right? There's all these kind of tricks in all software for doing some commonly used things that are good with a little mouse click or a little, arrow nudge or things like that. So rest assured that functionality is there. Now, before I move on to kind of working with statistics for a little bit, the last thing I want to show you about gates is what do we do if we want to change the scatter gate? I know in other software, if I wanted to change the scatter gate and say use a polygon gate instead, I'd probably have to go through and recreate the entire gating hierarchy and recreate my statistics and do all these sorts of things. So what I can do in FCS Express, we make this pretty easy, right? If I said I wanted to use a polygon gate instead of that square gate, FCS Express prompts me when that gate is created and it says, do you want to replace one? And I'm going to replace that scatter gate with this one. My hierarchy stays the same, my statistics is updated, everything is working the same as it was before, except I'm using this new gating position, right? So I know some folks, they come from other software, that's been a frustration for them for years in that software package. Keep in mind, we've got that tool there and it works pretty nicely and easily. There was another question that came in about keyboard shortcuts. It's in our manual. I'll come back. I'll show you that at the end of the webinar. There's a lot of little keyboard shortcuts that you can go in and access that are all searchable in our manual. But let's talk about statistics and let's talk about moving into getting this data out, right? I could have created, a very fancy 14 color analysis from this data set with lots and lots of gates, but I don't think that's worth anybody's time today, right? We're here to try and get some of the basics and some of the translations. So as you're working with bigger panels and things like that, you're just dragging and dropping gates out, right? You're creating new plots, you're creating the visualizations that you need. But when it comes to statistics, right, I know in FlowJo you're kind of used to having different statistics underneath these data files, or sometimes you need a more complex statistic, so you actually have to take those statistics and open up the table editor. And if you want to do MFI divided by something, you have to use the table editor and create all these sorts of different things, and then bring that into the layout editor, right? In FCS Express, we really simplify things, right? One way that we simplify things is by using spreadsheets. Right here in the Insert tab, there's an option for a spreadsheet, and there's no separate table editor. There's no separate kind of statistic box. This looks and feels and works like Excel. So if you've typed in values and you say one cell divided by another equals something, you get a result. And if you make a change in that spreadsheet, the result updates, right? Now in FCS Express, these spreadsheets go far beyond copying, pasting, and manually typing things in, right? So if I wanted to get this statistic for CD4 into the spreadsheet, I could drag and drop it and it's in there. If I knew I had something from the CD8 gate and I wanted to get it in there, but I don't know what, right? Maybe I'll just drag the whole gate and say, hey, let's put in a number of events. Now I've got these two values, and if I wanted to do some sort of ratio of CD8 events divided by CD4% positive, I could do that. But check this out, right? As I move this gate over here, those values in the spreadsheet update immediately, right? So I get real-time results about what's being calculated in the spreadsheet. And the spreadsheets are really comprehensive. If I click up here on layout, I can change fonts, formatting, merging, wrapping text. I can do conditional formatting, which I'll come back to. I can do any formulas, right? So if I know in Excel how to do an average, well, try it over here in FCS Express. If I want to take the average of these two cells, I can do that. I get a result, and I know how to do this already. I didn't have to go and figure out how to use a table editor or something external to do this. I get that result because I know how to work with Excel. But again, this is just kind of a one-off result. I'm going to come back to one-off results in just a little bit. If I wanted to quickly get the results from a bunch of different data files very easily, I can drag them into the spreadsheet. I can say, give me a statistic, and say, hey, for scatter, give me the file name, give me the number of events, maybe CD3, we'll pop in the median for that too, right? And it will give me a spreadsheet filled out with all the names of our data files, the number of events, the medians for CD3. So I've got all of my MFIs, all that kind of good stuff. And again, as I move gates, all of that information, not just across one, but across all data files will update. And this becomes a very powerful tool. So rather than just doing that quick and dirty result that you do in the workspace editor of looking at what's the highest expressor, you could come in here, and if I wanted to do something custom, like maybe it's going to equal the number of events divided by the CD3 MFI, I can calculate that. And just like Excel, I can drag that formula down, and now I have that custom statistic live updating across everything, right? It also comes into play here where if I wanted to get a little bit more fancy with what we do in Excel, I can put in things like color bars, right? I can put in color scaling. I can put in data bars for that information. So just like in Excel, we can do conditional formatting. We can do all that in FCS Express. So when we work in these spreadsheets in this kind of mood, in this format, I like to call this a quick and dirty analysis. You have a few data files, you wanted to create a few gates, create a few statistics, get them into a spreadsheet. You can do that. If you want to get this information out, well, you can come into the layout. And one thing is you can export. This isn't like a table editor export. This is a Excel export, right? And if I come over here and I open up that Excel export that I created, it's not just basic statistics, right? We have calculated values that we've created in FCS Express, maintaining the formulas over in Excel. We have our custom custom conditional formatting, maintaining in Excel. So I bring this up because you might be used to doing a lot of copy and paste in other software. Go a little bit further in FCS Express with your analysis, because all of these custom statistics and reportables go out to Excel very easily, and they're not just CSV formats, right? So, that being said, again, this is kind of like a quick and dirty analysis, right? The other kind of analysis you might want to do, let me get rid of the spreadsheet here. Oops. Is a kind of more integrated analysis, right? So our statistics, we want to kind of report on this page, not just something simple across 8 files. I want to report something more in depth. So we can do that in FCS Express. I like using text boxes, right? I can call this my experiment. Because in FCS Express, again, remember what we're doing is we're moving to eliminate those multiple steps between the workspace and the layout editor, right? We're going right to that, layout at the end. So in this experiment text box, I can put information, right? So if I wanted to put in the CD3% gated, I can drag and drop that into the text box, and I can say CD3 positive equals this. And because that came from the data, it updates in real time, right? If I wanted to get, a kind of quick and dirty list of statistics associated with the gates, I can pop that up. And, you can always work with these statistics, but I like these because then I can come in and I can say, hey, well, let's just drag 2,344 into here. And now I have that statistic that I need in the report. I can remove that kind of default statistics box and it's still updating, right? Now, when it comes to a custom statistic, you can still utilize these spreadsheets, right? So if I open up a new spreadsheet, and I showed you before, let's put in CD4 and let's put in CD8. We'll do a kind of custom ratio here, equals 8s divided by 4s. I get a value in the spreadsheet, but that spreadsheet value can be integrated into your report just by dragging it and dropping it over here, right? So call this custom ratio. And if I remove this spreadsheet, it doesn't delete it, just kind of gets it into the background. I don't have that spreadsheet in my way. I'm still getting that custom value. And again, what will happen is as we move gates, as we move between different data files, this report is filling out. Now, the report in FCS Express, this layout, this text box, you can do more complicated things. Like I can drag an entire plot in here and I can say, give me a keyword, give me metadata, give me something from the experiment that I can insert in here. And if I put in something like, the sample name, or if I put in the drug treatment, things like that when I acquire the data, well, I can pop that in there. And as I move between data files, that information updates, right? So that means that when I analyze this data, I don't have to go back to my lab notebook. I don't have to go back to my electronic lab notebook, figure out what I did that day. This is information that's stored with the data, and I can pop it right in there. Even if I wanted to put in something like today's date, right? So that way, when I use this as a template in the future, because that's something we can do in FCS Express, I can insert a token, right click, and if I put in the current date, it's going to stamp in what date I did this analysis on, right? So these are things that you might have to do extraneous to the fact in other software that you can build up directly in FCS Express. But, think about, at this point, in FlowJo, you've probably already had a bunch of open windows, you've created a bunch of gates, you've dragged things over to the workspace editor, and then you have to do a batch process to get those things out. So how do we get this information out of FCS Express into some reportable way? Well, there's two ways. One is if I wanted to get a quick, report from this from just one data file, I could always go up here in the file tab and I can say export, right? So if I just wanted to export what's on the page, the PowerPoint, the PDF, maybe I needed a high resolution graphic from one plot, I could do that, right? But I like to show this to you. I'll say open it after I save it. And I'm going to call this a test in the folder where I'm going to save it, which is popping up on the other screen. What's going to happen is FCS Express is going to render a PowerPoint presentation for this data set. It's going to save that and it's going to launch up PowerPoint, right? So here comes PowerPoint. Here's my information. Now in FCS Express, things are very different than some of the graphics in FlowJo. We don't have to export to a separate vector graphic format. All of the graphics that come out are vector graphics, right? So you can see that when I make this picture larger in PowerPoint. Even though it came out of FCS Express, I know we're over in PowerPoint now. It's a vector graphic that you can make very large and that you can do things with, right? I showed you that you could format the axis labels and things like that in FCS Express. But I know if you've got a lab presentation in 5 minutes and you forgot to take off forward scatter H or times 1,000, you wanted to make a quick change. In other software, you might open up the low resolution exports in PowerPoint. You might put a little white text box over the label. Well, check this out. Because of the way that we export this information from FCS Express, we can ungroup these vector graphics. And if you don't like FSCH and you want to just put in forward scatter, right? You can do that. Now you're ready for your presentation. No little white text box, no using Photoshop. If you need the distribution of the data, grab that, put together your figure that you need to put together, right? These are all things that you can accomplish now in PowerPoint because of the way that FCS Express exports that, right? So again, I know we're working outside of FCS Express now, but we really set you up for success with generating publication quality graphics by the way that we do that. Now that's kind of a one-off export, right? I've got 8 data files. So how do I actually get all 8 data files exported in some sort of useful way? I know in FlowJo, you put one data file set into the editor, you duplicate that, you do a batch to rows and columns and things like that. The way that we do it in FCS Express is we open up what's called the batch actions. And if we want to say, save all this stuff to PowerPoint, well, we open up the save the PowerPoint. We say where to save this. So I'm going to call this my analysis. And what FCS Express is going to do is for every data file that we have, and don't forget, we've already went through and checked all of our gates. When we click run, it's going to zip through 8,000 data files, however many you have, collate that information, put it into PowerPoint. It's going to launch up the PowerPoint presentation when it's done, and you're going to be able to review your data sets, right? So here comes my analysis. I've got my 3 plots for drug 1, my 3 plots for drug 2, my reportables, right? All kind of running down the different PowerPoint slides. Now, the other thing that you might want is you might not want to use those spreadsheets in FCS Express to collate thousands and thousands of results, right? If I need to export CD3 positives in the drug name and get that information to Excel really quickly, well, of course, there's a better way of doing that in FCS Express. If we come up to the batch and we say export to Excel, well, I'm going to create another Excel export. This is going to be called my analysis. And what we can do is we populate that little spreadsheet node with whatever information we want to export. So if we want to export percent gated, drag it and drop it. If you want to export something from the gate, drag it and drop it. Choose what you want to export. Let's choose number of events for CD3. If you want to put everything in that text box into your Excel report, drag the text box. It's going to put everything into there, right? So what will happen now is when I run this batch, I'm just going to run the Excel export now. It's going to collate all the information across 80,000 different samples to Excel. We have all the information that we need into that report. There is no copy and paste. This is an Excel format. It's all working really, really well. Now, the other question I generally get from FlowJo users is, all right, well, I see in your export to PowerPoint, that's great and all, but you only put one data file per page, right? In FlowJo, I'm used to putting multiple data files per page and comparing them side by side using their batch process. How do we do this, right? So of course, we can do this. You open up that export to PowerPoint and you just make some changes here. You say combine output from all iterations into a single file. And kind of like in FlowJo, you'd have to come up here and you have to say, hey, how do you want to organize this stuff? Let's put it in one column with, 3 rows per page, right? I'm going to say, make sure we crop everything to the right size. And now what's going to happen, I'll run this batch again. It's going to create that PowerPoint export, and it's going to look a little bit more like what you're familiar with from other software packages with the exported results in the layout editor. So FCS Express is going to open this up. Let me make sure I get that report. And sure enough, we have 3 samples per page, aligned on our PowerPoint slide here for as many different samples as we have. We can change the spacing, we can make these tighter, you can do whatever it is that you want. But we can achieve that sort of result. And remember, we didn't batch to a place and then export to Excel. or export to PowerPoint, we batched directly to PowerPoint, right? Reducing another step in the process. Now, to kind of swing back around on this again, right? We talked about FCS Express is kind of a combination of working with, say, the layout editor and the workspace at the same time to achieve a more efficient result. Well, how do you save this and work with this over and over and over again, right? Because if I'm doing the same experiment tomorrow, right, and I need to have another 8 data files, I wouldn't want to have to come in and recreate the wheel. So in FCS Express, I can do save, I can do save as, whatever I want. I'm going to call this my analysis, and it saves what's called a layout file, a .fav file in FCS Express. So when I come back tomorrow and I want to open it up, it will be in my recent items. I can click open, and it's going to call up exactly what I did yesterday, right? And if I decided, hey, I don't want to work with these data files today, I want to come in, choose 4 new ones. I can say change data on all objects. Everything updates to the new data files. I'm going to come through here, zip through, make sure all of my gates are in the correct position, make sure I got all the statistics I need. And I don't have to go back and redo opening up a whole bunch of windows, batching to a layout editor, right? I can just come up here, click run on the batch. All the new data files that I've analyzed are going to be exported to PowerPoint in the format that I want, exported to Excel in the format that I want. And that's one of the really big and major efficiencies for working with FCS Express, is that once you create an analysis, whether it be something simple like this or complicated across many different pages with many different phenotypes and subtypes and things like that, you can work with it over and over again. So that being said, I'm going to come back around at the end and answer a few questions. I do see a few questions coming through there, specific ones that I can address on the end of the webinar here. But I did want to show you a few other things. One is, a lot of times we get questions about how to do a histogram overlay, right? It's very simple in FCS Express. Draw a histogram. If you want to gate it, drag and drop a gate to it, right? I'll just look at CD3. I've got different data files here in my data list. Well, I can drag and drop onto the histogram, say add them as an overlay, and now I have a histogram overlay, right? But what do I do with this at this point? Remember what we talked about in the beginning, right click, format. If you want to come in here and change, by exponential scaling, right? Come in here, use the slider bar, change your by exponential scaling to whatever it is your width basis that you want, right? If you want to come into the overlays and say, hey, let's give them some smoothing, let's fill them, let's give them a transparency, right? Well, now you're ready for publication, right? If you wanted to come in, show a legend on here, pop in your legend, put in your file names, put it at the top, put it at the bottom, wherever it is that you want, right? You're ready for your lab presentation with these histogram overlays. Okay, so these are pretty simple and straightforward. We can come back and answer some questions about that. But I did want to wrap up with the last thing in here about working with kind of more specialized tools, right? So these days, a lot of folks are using high dimensional data reduction tools, or using data cleaning tools. In other software, they're having to plug in and integrate with R to do all of these things. I'm going to give you our 2-minute primer on how to work with high dimensional data reduction and how to work with data cleaning tools, right? We keep all of this stuff up here in our transformations. I do not have R plugged in. I'm not using R. I'm not using scripting. I'm not going to a repository to go grab scripts. What I'm doing in FCS Express is, if I want to do a t-SNE analysis on a data file, I choose t-SNE. I pick and choose the parameters of interest I want to include in that transformation. I drag and drop that to the data file. And now that plot, once t-SNE is done calculating, we'll have t-SNE X and t-SNE Y, and I can start working with this data. Of course, I probably want to format my high dimensional data reduction charts a little bit so I get some more and better information. Like with these, I probably want to show a legend over here. So that way, if I wanted to show the heat of CD3, heat of CD4, things like that, I can work with it. All right. I know there's a ton of other things that go into working with t-SNE and UMAP, right? Don't get me wrong. I'm simplifying this for the benefit of the webinar and our time today, right? But one of the things you generally have to do for these data reductions is merge data files. So if you're looking for that concatenate feature that FlowJo has, we don't call it concatenation, we call it file merging, right? Same thing. I come in here, I say merge FCS files, I choose a few files that I want to merge. I can say change data on all plots. And now this file is a, uh, a multiple of all the data files I've merged together. So if I want to look at CD3 across the file identifier, across the file name, whatever I put in there, very quick and easy to do this. There's no separate tool to come in and concatenate things. It just kind of works. And the last thing I want to go into with these pipelines before we come back around and answer a bunch of questions I've seen coming through here is data cleaning, right? I know we saw a lot of the registrations that came through. Folks were asking us about, how do you do things like Flow AI? How do you do things like Flow Cut, right? So I'll show you how easy this is. We come in and we add what's called a pipeline step in FCS Express. What a pipeline does is it strings together a few different of these algorithms. And sure enough, we've got predefined ones. So if I wanted to run Flow AI, I choose to insert that algorithm. I've got predefined steps for all this stuff. And the best way to kind of show you Flow AI here is if I put in gate statistics, and let me grab the no gate population. I'll pop this in here, right? That's going to show me how many events are in our data file, right? Or the data that we're analyzing today. So let me come in here, make it a little bit bigger and bolder, right? When we apply Flow AI to this, that event number changed because it cleaned the data. Look at that, the beads went away up there, it cleaned them all out, right? So because we have that set up, we can still use our data list. Flow AI is being applied as I move between data files, right? Some of these, it's doing a better job cleaning out the beads than the others, but that's how we utilize this functionality. There's no art, there's no plugins. This is all directly in the software. So that way, folks who aren't familiar with writing scripts and working with R can utilize all of this advanced functionality in a very streamlined and efficient and easy to use sort of way. Okay, so we will come back to talking about some of the questions and working in context of the data here in just a minute. But I did want to kind of summarize some of the things that we've seen today, right? So we've talked about working with the data list and the layout in the FCS Express versus working with the workspace in the layout editor in FlowJo, right? So when we work in FCS Express, it's kind of what you see is what you get. You're not working between two separate, kind of modules and tools. You're working in one place to get your final result. You've seen some of the translations for the plot types and the formatting, right? Just because we don't have a module for backgating doesn't mean we don't have it, right? We use color dot plots. Just because you don't see zebra plots, it doesn't mean we don't have them. We call them contour plots with black and white stripes. With the gating, right? Creating gates, working with data specific gates, groups of gates, this is very simple and easy. We work with the spreadsheets at FCS Express instead of the table editor, which makes life very quick and efficient. We use batching in the software, which exports results directly to PowerPoint, to PDF, to high resolution images, to Excel, without having to use a kind of middle tool to do that. You saw some of the specialized visualization tools that we have, some of the formatting that we can do to accomplish this. And with these integrated transformations, these pipelines that we have in the software, doing things like Tisney and UMAP and Flow AI, soon Phenograph will be in here, it all becomes very simple and easy to use. So what I want to say before we jump to some questions is first, thank you for attending. We really appreciate everybody coming out today to view this webinar, and I hope everybody was able to get a little bit more about working in FCS Express coming from FlowJo. If you have any questions, please contact support@denovosoftware.com. Don't forget how good our support is as it's relative to some of the other software companies that are out there. If you haven't worked with FCS Express, you can get a free demo from denovosoftware.com. Just go to the website, look for the free trial button in the upper right corner. You'll be able to grab that. And of course, check out with your core facility, with your, the resources that you have available. Lots and lots of labs have FCS Express there, accessible. You just need to go and ask for it. So with that, thanks again for coming out to today, and we'll be answering a few questions in just a minute.